It is 12 o'clock. I'm Hugo Rifkind, and this is Times Radio. In a moment, PMQs, but first, let's have a look at the headlines this lunchtime. The government has claimed the UK was prepared defensively ahead of the US-Israeli attacks on Iran, despite a drone hitting a British base in Cyprus. HMS Dragon is being deployed to the eastern Mediterranean, although the destroyer could take a week to reach its destination. Reports suggest that Tehran is close to appointing a new supreme leader, with Mojtaba Khamenei said to be the favoured candidate. He is the son of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who was killed in the US-Israeli strikes on Saturday. Police have raided the Police Federation's national headquarters in Surrey. Officers made 3 arrests on suspicion of fraud by abuse of position. And the government has launched a review as part of its efforts to tackle anti-Semitism in schools and colleges. 1 in 5 Jewish parents say their child has faced anti-Semitism at or near school. We will have a full news roundup at 1 p.m. But now, live on Times Radio and on the Times YouTube channels, it's time for this.
PMQs Unpacked on Times Radio. Unpacking the politics and cutting through the crossfire.
And I'm joined, as always, by the Times chief political commentator, Patrick Maguire. Hello, Patrick.
Hello, Hugo.
What's the tea? How are you?
What's the tea? Well, my tea's not arrived yet. Sorry, that makes me sound like the most demanding panellist on Times Radio.
I'm sure it'll get here.
Well, I've been listening to some interest with your item on ties as someone who wears a tie every day.
Yep.
And literally every week, people say, I was at a dinner last week and somebody said to me, why do you wear a tie? I said, it's like that line you quoted from the thick of it. It's part of getting dressed.
Part of getting dressed, yeah. Well, someone got in touch this morning saying, Sam got in touch saying, what a bunch of Philistines. A tie is an essential statement of style and character and taste. And on it goes. Sam, I think you make a good point. Patrick would agree. Look, we're also blessed this week with the return of the Sunday Times' former political editor, now political editor of The Spectator. It's Tim Shipman.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Thank you. It's very nice to be back with you all.
It's like you never went away.
Well, in a way, I haven't, because I'm an every week listener. We only do our own PMQs podcast a bit later in the day, so I still prefer to listen to PMQs through the medium of Unpacked.
Wonderful. Do you find yourself shouting at us in a rage?
Not really, no. It's a violent
really.
agreement a lot of the time.
Okay.
But now I'm in the sort of guest slot. I'll make a series of left-wing jokes and hopefully...
I felt for you since you left, because actually... This isn't on you at all. PMQs has got much better than it was when you were here.
Yes.
I don't mean PMQs Unpacked has obviously remained at its high standard. But Kemi Badenoch's got a lot better.
I think the skill, as Patrick will say, is in keeping it interesting when it's boring, but it's not been boring, has it?
Yeah,
Not at all.
Yeah,
Not at all.
I mean, tell me about what your view of... do you see the same improvement in Kemi Badenoch over the last, whatever it's been, 6 months?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you and I spent months and months saying how absolutely hopeless she was.
Yeah.
And then she suddenly, about last September, I left in June, she suddenly got much better. Sort of got rid of Peter Mandelson, and she's relatively sharp most weeks now, isn't she? But, I mean, the great thing about this, lots of people say, what's the point of PMQs? And I always used to make the argument that it's about keeping the morale upon your own side and prosecuting your arguments and sort of testing your lines and that sort of thing, and it's still got some use for that. But quite what effect it's having out there in the wider world, who knows? Because while Kemi Badenoch is 10 times as good as she was when I left, it hasn't made a great deal of difference to the Conservative poll standing. So I do think it means that if they have a disastrous time at the May elections, that her own side will kind of give her a bit more slack to deal with that. And it's not clear that the Labour Party will do the same for the Prime Minister.
What are you expecting, Patrick, this week? Obviously, it's going to be Iran-based. Is it going to be Starmer being no Winston Churchill? Is it going to be Richard Hermer-focused? Is it going to be military unpreparedness?
Well, all of the above, I think. I mean, I'm not to continue the... Well, I will continue the either great or unedifying journalistic tradition when you can only talk about colleagues by saying how great their work is. But I expect someone in the Leader of the Opposition's office might have been reading Tim's recent pieces about the special relationship not being so special, defence funding, all of that stuff, because there's a wealth of stuff to nail this number 10 on if you want to say, look, you're staring down the barrel of global conflict and, the army, the armed forces aren't worth the name, and, you can't get your calls picked up by Donald Trump, and the Attorney General is a left-wing wokester.
So it strikes me there's the relatively cheap stuff she could go in on, which she's not above, which is the sort of, on the sort of dancing on the pinhead of what the international law situation was and the reticence and all that kind of stuff. But there's also the very, very heavy-hitting stuff of we are belatedly sending something to Cyprus to defend our base in Cyprus, which could very easily be presented as an absolute failing in national defence.
Well, we could have done that 3 weeks ago.
That's
frankly.
my point. But that would be a really solid attack rather than a kind of like this makes you look bad, you're not Donald Trump's best friend anymore.
Yeah, I think most of the debate has been about should we or should we not have joined the military action. I think most people in this country didn't particularly want us to, but I think what's been missed in the sort of Labour Party jubilation that Keir Starmer is sort of belatedly doing his Hugh Grant act from Love Actually, that in taking so long to get off the fence and say what we actually thought about this and to find a way of protecting Gulf allies and Cyprus and those people, that we've done a lot of damage to our relationship with allies, not just Donald Trump. And I think that has, that ought to concern people on the left who do generally take an internationalist approach to these things and think that doing things multilaterally and keeping your allies on side is a good thing. The people I've been speaking to in the last 72 hours are pretty horrified that the position we're now in was not adopted on Friday evening rather than sometime late on Sunday, and only really got expression on Monday and Tuesday.
Is there a danger of navel gazing here? I was a bit struck by looking at all the front pages today. There is a sort of huge global conflict going on, and we're sort of, bickering about precisely who made what decision when, and it just seems like, I don't know, maybe it's a bit parochial. You know what I mean?
Well, we do live in this particular parish, though.
Yeah.
I think it's fair enough that we should scrutinise and focus on the extent to which we will be involved, and the nature of our involvement in that global conflict.
All right,
and the perception has also been that Starmer's done pretty well on foreign affairs, and this looks like an example of where he really hasn't.
Well, look, lots of people getting in touch already on YouTube. Jeff says, lovely, Patrick and Shippers, the Simon and Garfunkel of political reporting. Which is which?
I would love to know which of us is which.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Simon and Garfunkel?
Am I familiar with Simon and Garfunkel?
A man of your
age. Man of my age. My mental age is about 107, so...
Would you like to be Simon or Garfunkel?
Bright Eyes is a beautiful song, and I wouldn't be so presumptuous as to say Tim couldn't be Paul Simon, so...
Well,
happy to be Garfunkel.
I think Garfunkel had the better voice, but Simon wrote the better songs. So you can figure that out between the two of you.
Ooh, how do you convey that journalistically?
I'll just sit here being Bob Dylan. Let's get question one.
The opposition.
Mr. Speaker, can I pay tribute to our brave servicemen and women in the Middle East during this very difficult period? Yeah. Our bases in Cyprus and Bahrain have now been attacked. The US has taken offensive action to destroy missile launch sites to defend British territory. Yeah. Why will the Prime Minister not allow the RAF to do the same?
Yeah. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, can I make clear this is obviously an extremely serious situation, and I know the whole country is worried about the potential for escalation. Right. They're worried about the impact on their lives, particularly when they see what's happening with energy. The family and friends of those who are caught in the region will be worried sick about them. And, of course, we've got civilians and military personnel at risk in the region. We need to act, therefore, with clarity, with purpose, and with a cool head. The protection of UK nationals is our number one priority. And we're taking action to reduce the threat, with planes in the sky in the region, intercepting incoming strikes, deploying more capability to Cyprus, and allowing US planes to use UK bases to take out Iran's capability to strike. What I was not prepared to do on Saturday was for the UK to join a war unless I was satisfied there was a lawful basis and a viable, thought-through plan. That remains my position.
It seems to me, Patrick, I'll come to you first. It seems to me that what Keir Starmer said there was extremely reasonable, but also didn't answer the question.
No, he didn't answer the question, and that was the most striking thing about the answer. Seems to be just repeating the position he set out several times since the weekend. And Kemi Badenoch asks a good question, because we're now in totally different territory. UK nationals and bases are under threat from those Iranian launch sites. So the definitions of offensive and defensive are shifting.
I mean, there's an inherent there's an inherent oddness in the way even you have to present this if you're coming Badenoch. You say that America has now taken offensive action to defend us, which you're kind of like, well, the words are doing a lot of work there. Fundamentally, though, Tim, the question for Starmer, which he did not answer, is they're bombing us, why aren't we bombing them back?
Yeah, I mean, that's it. But it's also subtler than that, because the legal advice says we couldn't join offensive strikes against Iran, but we could if we were being attacked and our allies were being attacked. So we've allowed the use of our bases for the Americans to attack those missile launch sites and where they're manufactured and the rest of it. We could now legally be also launching those bombing raids. I mean, I've spoken to a lot of people in the last few days for a piece that will be out tomorrow morning that basically shows that we are short of both the will and the kit to go and do that in any meaningful way. And this is what's enraged everybody. I mean, I loved the terminology. You know, we have planes in the sky. Well, what are they doing, Prime Minister? Not a great deal. You know, you sort of have this vision of someone at the MOD phoning up, you know, saying, are you in the air yet? Are you in the air? We can now announce that, like the SAS is always on standby. The planes have been in the sky, which is very exciting. But all this was predictable. There were meetings last week in which it was predicted that Iran would fire back, and on that basis that we could do this stuff. And it took them until Sunday, when it had actually started happening, for the government to have the foresight that it was happening. I mean, it's they missed a trick as well, because my mother-in-law was in Riyadh over the weekend. If they'd sent her to Tehran, that would have sorted things out in about 3 minutes flat.
I thought you were going to say if they'd moved faster, you wouldn't have had to have her back. I thought that was a terribly insensitive thing to say on the radio.
I'll guess as Les Dawson.
In terms of assets in the region, I think they missed a trick there, to be honest.
Let's get question 2.
That wasn't the question I asked him. Nobody wants to see an escalation. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, our bases, in case they don't realise, our bases have already been attacked. Iran is trying to kill our servicemen and women. He is catching arrows rather than stopping the archer. That's what we're talking about. Why is he asking our allies to do what we should be doing ourselves? We are, I would say to Labour MPs, we are in this war whether they like it or not. What is the Prime Minister waiting for?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let me give a little more detail, because for a number of weeks now we've been pre-deploying our capabilities to the region. In doing so, we've been liaising very closely with the United States, as the House would have expected. Therefore, radar systems were pre-deployed, ground-based air defence was pre-deployed, counter-drone systems were pre-deployed, and F-35 jets were pre-deployed. Mr. Speaker, that is why, since Saturday morning, multiple F-35s and Typhoons have been in operation not just in the Middle East, but across Cyprus. Further missions were flown overnight, Typhoons defending in particular Qatar, and F-35s defending other regional parties. We're resupplying our air defence missiles today. Wildcat helicopters with anti-drone capabilities will be in Cyprus this week, and HMS Dragon will be deployed to the Mediterranean. And of course, in agreement with the ES, they're using our bases to conduct the operations to strike Iranian missiles and launchers. Mr. Speaker, that is the action that we are taking. That is the agreement that we've reached with the United States to protect our nationals.
So he's very clearly there trying to say there is stuff going on. We are working with the United States. You might be interested to know, I wanted to look up that phrase to see where it came from, catching the arrow rather than stopping the archer. Doesn't seem to come from anywhere.
Well, so he just made that up.
Well,
she did.
The very interesting thing about that is that I spoke to someone in the last 24 hours who used that very phrase. So now I know exactly which former military commander is advising the leader of the opposition.
That is very interesting.
Source protection means I can't say, but that's very interesting. Because that is a phrase I've heard in the last day.
But isn't it very Starmerish to repeat verbatim a phrase he probably doesn't quite understand that was coined by somebody else?
It was her who said that. It was her who said that. I'm going to ask both of you this, because I think it's sort of fundamental to really what's going on here, because he again doesn't answer the question of why we're not actually striking Iran. Tim, you first. Why aren't we striking Iran?
Did you hear the noise behind him?
Is that the only answer? Or is it
no one here wants escalation, and there was a distinctive murmur from the Labour benches of "you do." And, Labour lost the by-election last week on a wave of Muslim votes going to the Greens. They're very sensitive to that. But it's not just that. It's that Starmer, and Richard Hermer have their whole basis of their careers is based on respect for a sort of near religious zeal for international law. There are other interpretations of international law. Even the German Chancellor came out with one and said it's virtually irrelevant in this situation. I have no doubt what Israel is doing is legal and just. But that's not how Hermer and Starmer see it. And the politics of it push them in that direction as well, because internally they've got problems. And bluntly, when you see my piece on Thursday morning, you'll see that the Cabinet was not united on this, and there were different views, and that has constrained what Downing Street has been able to do.
Patrick, would you agree with that fully? Is there an element here that actually, our military isn't necessarily up to it, and the moment we deploy it, that gets made much more plain? Is there a direct link between what he's doing now, between how well the Greens did in the by-election? What do you think?
I think it's all true to varying extents. What was the first thing Keir Starmer sought to emphasise yesterday? This is not Iraq. And, that is a word, and that is an intervention that is freighted with great significance in the Labour Party, which 20 years ago faced a very similar situation to which that it's now facing in seats like Gorton and Denton. It was George Galloway, it was the Liberal Democrats, it was facing an anti-war challenge, similar to the one that's seen it lose half a dozen seats to Jeremy Corbyn and the Gaza Independents last time. So clearly that is not irrelevant, because Keir Starmer is shooting his message through pretty comprehensively with messaging to say, don't worry, I'm not doing that, and it's not like Gaza either. And the point about, the military's not up to it, it was striking there listening to saying we've been deploying our capabilities, and they all sounded pretty technical and pretty low-key. So you had to wonder and the response to the question was, don't worry, we're doing loads. But I don't think anybody listening to that would say, wow, that's, it's not quite the massive US flotilla moving, and, all the B-52s moving across the Western Hemisphere to land on that big aircraft carrier in the Gulf, is it? So
and the bottom line there is he's sending HMS Dragon, which is a Type 45 destroyer, which any military expert will tell you is one of our best air defence capabilities, is on that. There were 2 ships available. Neither was sent until last night, and only one is going now. And the other naval vessel that would have been of use was an Astute-class submarine that fires cruise missiles. Well, that's around Australia at the moment, and it passed through the Gulf area sort of 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I was speaking to people yesterday who said, well, would it not have been prudent to keep it in the area just in case, looking at what we were hearing from the Americans about what might unfold here?
Let's get our next question.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has read out a long list. It is not enough. He says that we are pre-deploying. The one ship which we are sending, HMS Dragon, is still in Portsmouth. The fact is the Type 45s cannot take out incoming missiles. This is not enough. He's read out a long list. The people who understand know it is not enough. He should be doing more. Yesterday, the Chancellor could have given more money to defence. Instead, I don't know why they're laughing. I don't know why that's funny. Yes, not funny. Yesterday, the Chancellor could have given more money to defence. Instead, she gave more money for welfare. Their priorities are all wrong, Mr. Speaker. Their priorities are all wrong. They can chanter as much as they like. The fact of the matter is that the war in Iran is happening now.
Order. Mr. Bailey, I don't like that. I don't think it becomes you either. An officer and a gentleman, I expect more.
The fact of the matter, Mr. Speaker, is that the war...
I can lip read as well. So please, let's learn something. If not, you'll learn the way out.
Mr. Speaker, the country is not going to be distracted by Labour MPs moaning. The fact of the matter is that the war in Iran is happening now. But the OBR say the government won't hit 3% on defence for 5 years. The war is happening now. There is no urgency from the Prime Minister. Why is he leaving the job of funding our armed forces to the next government?
Prime Minister.
I'm not going to take lectures on defence from the party opposite. They came came into office, and what did they do? They cut the defence budget. They missed army...
Order. Mr Philp, you've moved from there to there. You're even louder here, so I think twice.
Prime Minister. Not only did they cut the defence budget, they missed army recruitment targets every year for 14 years. They left morale in our armed forces at an all-time low, and our forces hollowed out. That's the words of Ben Wallace, the former Defence Secretary. Labour, by contrast, is delivering the biggest boost to defence spending since the Cold War. £270 billion over this Parliament. And we're doing that because we're focused on what matters. And she's right. The war is, of course, happening now. We have to focus on that. Across the country, people are worried about those that are trapped in the region. And, Mr Speaker, that is why we're taking action. And I can update the House that yesterday more than 1,000 British nationals arrived back in the UK on commercial flights from the UAE. A further 8 flights are due to leave the UAE to the UK today. I can confirm, Mr Speaker, that the first charter flight is expected to leave Oman later today, and 2 more will come in the coming days. The country really does want to know this. I'm sorry. Family and friends are worried sick about people who are caught out. I will not be put on. I can announce, Mr Speaker, we will lay on additional charter flights in coming days. British Airways are now laying on an extra flight from Oman, and the Foreign Secretary will have further discussions today. And can I urge all those in the House who have constituents who are caught in this to make sure that they do register their presence so we can do whatever we can to help them get home safely.
OK, awful lot going on there in that little exchange. I guess...
It lasted about 15 minutes.
Well, I mean, so we can come maybe to the evacuation flights in a minute. I guess the nub of the question Kemi Badenoch was asking there, and really, I don't think it was her best question because it meandered around a bit. But Patrick, the nub of it there was, why aren't you spending more? You're not cutting welfare, which means you can't spend money on defence. I mean, I've got to say, the way he answered, so Sean had been in touch on the WhatsApps. He says, can we remember that our armed forces were severely underfunded for 14 years by the Tories? Absolutely true. It's always a comeback that is there in the Prime Minister's back pocket. Nonetheless, they are struggling to fund the military, and one of the reasons why they're struggling to fund the military is because they can't cut spending from anywhere else.
Well, indeed, and look at what the OBR said yesterday about welfare spending will reach 400 billion quid a year. I think it was by the end of this Parliament. So it's clearly Kemi Badenoch is on something. Nigel Farage, by the way, and Reform said something very similar about where the money for increased defence spending needs to come from. And Keir Starmer keeps making commitments on defence spending, quite big and bold commitments on defence spending, with no clear sense of how he's going to get there and how deliverable it is, and without necessarily choosing anything. And in this context, by the way, in this new political context, to return to your earlier point about the Greens, does Keir Starmer have the political capital to go into the divided cabinet Tim was talking about before, or to stand up before the Parliamentary Labour Party or the public and say, by the way, we're going to try and cut PIP again
for tanks,
for armoured cars and tanks and guns? And I don't necessarily think he does, and that is the problem.
Yeah, I mean, Tim, the strategy there of delivering very important information about evacuations from the Middle East that thankfully do not affect your mother-in-law, is that the time to deliver a message like this? Do you do that basically to you're the statesman and she's not the statesman?
Well, I think he was trying to just shut her up, wasn't he, and say, you need to think about the people on the ground here, which is a nice way of moving on from, the serious subject. I mean, I feel a bit sorry for Starmer. He went off and made his pledge of eventually hitting 3.5% on defence spending. I think a lot of people in the government thought nobody else in NATO would get anywhere close to that, and they all turned up at the NATO summit last year, and everybody went, yes, let's do it. At which point the government went, oh, cripes. And Rachel Reeves, frankly, has not found the money to do that. If you take out the Trident nuclear deterrent, we're spending about 1.6%, which is about the same as Spain, who Donald Trump has just sort of announced he's going to stop trading with. So it's all a bit tricky. The other thing that interested me there was that the chap who the Speaker was telling off was Calvin Bailey, the MP for Leighton and Wanstead, who was an RAF officer during the Iraq War.
Right.
And he actually spoke out during that PLP meeting on Monday night and effectively said, thank you, Prime Minister for looking after, our boys and girls in uniform and doing this the right way. So he does have the support of those backbenchers who seem pretty narked that the Tories are raising any of these questions. But, not to absolve the Tories on defence spending, but, the world has changed and everybody accepts that. And as Badenoch says, now is when the cash is needed, and it just ain't there at the moment.
Well, look, Jarlath gets in touch and says, isn't the answer obvious here? Conscription for those on benefits. Win-win. Too soon, Jarlath.
Well, Rishi Sunak tried a version of that for young people during the election campaign and everybody laughed at it.
We better crack on. We're way behind. Let's get question 4.
Mr. Speaker, I wasn't asking about evacuations. I was asking about defence spending. He needs to focus on the question he's being asked, not the statement that was prepared in the bunker. He stands there telling us that he's spending more money on defence. They're saying it. No, he isn't. In fact, they are cutting defence spending by £2.6 billion from the MOD budget this year. And that's why there are no Royal Navy warships in the Middle East, Mr. Speaker. In June last year, he should ask his Defence Secretary for the numbers, because that is what's happening. In June last year, Mr. Speaker, the government promised that its plan for funding our armed forces would be ready by autumn. In autumn, they promised it would be ready by the end of 2025. It is March 2026 and still nothing. So can the Prime Minister tell the House when his defence investment plan will finally be published?
Prime Minister.
Well, I'm sorry she's not interested in how people caught in the region are going to get home. I think for the vast majority of people watching this PMQs, that'll be the single most important thing on their mind. They cut defence spending, we're increasing defence spending. And we're doing that, Mr. Speaker, because we've stabilised the economy. Yesterday, the Chancellor announced inflation was down, interest rates down, borrowing down, debt down, investment, living standards growth up. Now, I know the Leader of the Opposition doesn't understand that. The Shadow Chancellor clearly doesn't understand that. Although I do have to thank him that in what's been a very difficult week, he provided some excellent unintended stand-up comedy in his response to the Chancellor yesterday.
Did he? Anyone? Unintentional stand-up comedy?
I was busy writing about the war rather than watching that. So
I must have missed it. Look, let's take a step back here. The fact that they're even having this kind of exchange at this sort of time, how usual is that? Because bits of Britain are under attack. The world is descending into war. You might have thought traditionally at this kind of time there'd be much more gravity, much more from the Conservatives, much more the government has our full support and everything it's doing to defend this country, but we have concerns about X, Y, Z, rather than you're rubbish, you've not got enough money, get out.
I think the war isn't quite real enough as a war for us yet to put an end to the sort of Yarbu sucks stuff. It is, as the Prime Minister said, regime change from the air. There's no boots on the ground, no British boots on the ground, apart from those that are sort of running away from Iranian missiles in Cyprus. And it's very much in the territory of what Tony Benn called in a speech in 1998, a computer game for our children or an interesting Channel 4 news item, this conflict, rather than something that's, immediate. The Prime Minister as well, by the way, I think his sort of approach to this, he's made a lot of sort of not insignificant announcements and operational statements, seemingly at random throughout all of this. You can sort of piece together a quite detailed sense of what the government is doing from this, but you'd have to sort of read between the lines of every response to every question. Yeah. So, and there's a lot to be said for the approach the Prime Minister takes at a moment like this, because he can use the authority of the office to say, no, listen, this is really serious. I'm going to begin with a comprehensive update of what we're doing, and sort of demand a level of decorum that might make Kemi Bay not look a bit silly.
He could have done all that at the top of PMQs.
Well, exactly.
If you've got something to say, that's when you often say it.
And he didn't. Instead, everything he had to say was sort of woven into the classic partisan, the Tories, 14 years of failure. And there's a legitimate debate to be had about this, but if you wanted seriousness, it's on the Prime Minister to use his weekly pulpit of Prime Minister's questions to demand it.
Yeah. Using it to deliver the information that way. Look, also, let me see where we've got. John gets in touch and says, Starmer's down, 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 ups, 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 a total failure. He never reads the room. It's true.
Well, the call response was a bit better than the last week or the week before, when it was never clear to the Labour backbenchers whether the next one was going to be up or down. So at least there was a succession of them with the same, that they could get in the habit of it.
He could hold up a sign like on a 1980s TV show.
But I think the problem here is that the two sides are genuinely divided about what's a good idea here. The Labour Party seems very, very against this, and lots of people in the Tory Party think it's not a bad thing that the Supreme Leader is no more. While there's a lot of doubt and confusion and fear about what comes next, in the olden days, it was Tony Blair going to war and the Tories saying, OK, we support you. And now it's Starmer not really going to war and the Tories going, we're not sure about this.
Let's go. Just a quick update on archers and arrows. Someone's been in touch saying Marco Rubio said it recently. I'm not sure. I haven't been able to find that. Someone else says, actually, isn't it that you aim at the archer rather than catch the arrow? Or aim at the archer rather than aim at the arrow?
Well, I think that's the idea. You should go and shoot the archers.
Whereas you shoot the archers, you ignore the archer, you catch the arrow. I don't know. Let's get our next question.
Mr. Speaker, he doesn't want to talk about the Defence Investment Plan because he doesn't know. He doesn't know what is going on any policy, so he reads statements that are pre-prepared irrespective of the question, and the whole country can see it. The truth is that because they spent money on welfare, there is no Defence Investment Plan. Because there is no Defence Investment Plan, they are not ordering enough missiles. The fact is that this crisis goes beyond defence spending. They can chant as much as they like. They are pathetic, spending money on welfare instead of defence spending. Sorry, Mr. Speaker. They're not just pathetic, they are also weak. This crisis goes beyond defence spending. It is also about the cost of living. This war is interrupting the supply of oil and gas. That is driving up the cost of petrol and making it more expensive to heat our homes. Yet he is stopping drilling in the North Sea while importing the same oil and gas from Norway. Does he think that at a time of geopolitical crisis, it makes sense to kill our oil and gas industry and give up that ready supply of energy?
Well, the question of the energy supply right now is a serious question, and we are doing all we can with allies to make sure that that is preserved. And it's vital that we keep trade flowing through the Straits of Hormuz, Mr. Speaker. The Energy Secretary met the International Energy Agency yesterday, and the Chancellor is meeting oil and gas companies today. We're keeping in close contact with our allies and key industry players. Again, I think the country wants to know what we're doing now in relation to what's happening in coming days. Mr. Speaker, oil and gas will be part of our energy mix for many years to come. But if Ukraine and the last few days have taught us anything, it is that all the time we're on the international market, we are vulnerable to these changes. That is why renewable energy, where we have our independence and security, would take us off those markets and give us the security that we need.
Tim, it's like she knows you're here. That was a question like old times. It was about everything.
Yes.
Everything.
A smorgasbord, a classic smorgasbord. We're now into Ed Miliband and energy. It's a very quick response to what Starmer says. Ed Miliband constantly says, what's the point in having fossil fuels because it's all set on the international markets? It is for oil, but it is not for gas. And Norway's busy drilling for these things, and we're not. This is, again, a massive ideological split. Most Conservatives want to see us do as much of everything as we can, so we're not at the mercy of overseas markets, and Miliband doesn't believe in that.
Well, but I mean, for another massive ideological split, she said it directly. She said they're pathetic, they're spending money on welfare rather than defence. Now, Patrick, I would say the Labour Party's benches are full of people who want to spend money on welfare rather than defence. It's basically it's the core belief of quite a lot of Labour's left, isn't it?
Yes. I think that to be fair to the Labour benches, lots of them accept the need for higher defence spending. They are just unwilling to face the political reality of the hard choices, making those decisions in a time of fiscal constraint and global instability means. And this PLP doesn't like choosing.
Let's get our last Kemi question.
Speaker, the Prime Minister again does not understand the energy transition. You do not need to stop drilling in oil and gas to get renewables. This is basic stuff. He doesn't understand his policy. He's got a sea of orcs and goons who have no idea how anything is working at all. Mr. Speaker, they can complain all they like, Mr. Speaker. The fact is, they are letting down the people out.
Order. You can't do a point of order in the middle of Prime Minister's question.
Mr. Speaker.
Can I ask my question?
You don't listen to the questions anyway.
Mr. Speaker, the situation in Iran shows this Prime Minister has the wrong priorities. When it comes to defence, it's someone else's job. When it comes to welfare, they find the money. When our bases are attacked, they call the lawyers. When our energy security is under threat, they stop drilling in the North Sea. Mr. Speaker, the truth is, or in fact, Mr. Speaker, after last week's by-election, isn't the truth that he isn't the truth? They might not like to hear it, but they are going to hear it, Mr. Speaker, whether they like it or not. Is it not the truth that he is prioritising his job security over our national security?
Mr. Speaker, I spent the week protecting British lives and our national interest. And Mr. Speaker, moments like this define a leader of the opposition. They can either step up, act in the national interest and show that they're fit to be Prime Minister, or they can expose their utter irrelevance. She has chosen the second.
I just couldn't get beyond a sea of orcs and goons.
No, we
you know
all
what?
lost it, didn't we?
Do you want to know an AI hallucination that's just happened? I googled it to see where that phrase had come from, and Google's AI tells me it's just been said in the Commons by Conservative leader Rishi Sunak.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So that shows something going wrong there.
I'd like to apologise to Keir Starmer for implying that he should have brought the seriousness to the table if that was Kemi Badenoch's closing effort. It's hard because, obviously Kemi Badenoch should be scrutinising the Prime Minister quite closely at this moment of global tumult. But, sea of orcs and goons is not even... It's not even normal knockabout, is it?
It's quite weird.
It's very weird and
Yeah.
sort of oddly, basically what you're saying, the cabinet is too ugly and too stupid to deal with. It's not Arthur Greenwood having a pop at
I
Neville
think it's something
Chamberlain,
to
is
do
it?
with sort of environmentalists, isn't it? I think it's that sort of. I think they're trying to get at that vibe.
Orcs and goons.
Rather than just saying they're all ugly. I think the sort of orcs is a phrase that gets used about sort of hardcore greenies.
Oh, really?
So I think that's what she was trying, but I mean, it was pretty desperate. I mean,
Depends on the orc.
Prime Minister,
that would be Orokai, strictly speaking. The
PM
green
putting
ones.
job security over national security is a perfectly good attack line, but it took him a very long time to get there. But Starmer, God, talk about the headmaster. In the previous question, he said, well, that's a serious question. It's like he's sort of marking her homework each week. I'm prepared to answer that because it's serious. And then at the end, she... he gave her both barrels. I mean, the interesting thing, of course, is when Keir Starmer was leader of the opposition, he backed airstrikes against the Houthis, who are a proxy of Iran and were not directly threatening the UK. And now, as Prime Minister, he's not backing airstrikes against the Iranians who have, by the government's own estimate, been behind 20 attempted terrorist attacks in the last year.
Yeah, fair point. Look, stick with us. In a moment, we'll be joined by Stefan Boscher from the Best from the Back Benches. This is Hugo Rifkind on Times Radio with Elevon, the full solution payment service provider for your business. Find out more at elevon.co.uk.
This is Times
your business. Find out more at elevon.co.uk.
Time now to have a look at the other exchanges at PMQs, the best of the rest from the back benches. But the Times politics newsletter editor Stefan Boscher is here. Before we get into the question, Stefan, you've got some breaking news for us.
I do. Just in the last 10 minutes, we have some extraordinary pieces of news. One is that 3 people have been arrested for spying, on suspicion of spying on behalf of China. And what's come out in the time since that announcement, we have reports from The Guardian, Bloomberg and others that one of the 3 people who have been arrested is in fact the partner of a Labour MP. We don't know which MP yet, but it is quite an extraordinary story and one which is clearly going to dominate the rest of the day's political news.
Who wants to guess? No.
Oh, no.
You know what, I have to say, I'd be lying if I said there wasn't some guessing going on.
Yeah.
Already. Because it's a sitting Labour MP and a former Labour MP, you know. It's going to keep the PLP occupied all day. But I of course, I would never speculate.
And 2 of these arrests were in Wales. Good to know
Really?
that the Chinese are, spying on the Welsh as well as the English.
Blimey. All right, what have you got for us from the backbenches then, Stefan?
So, like usual, we have the first question today from the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Ed Davey.
Let's hear it.
I thank the Prime Minister for his reply, but I hope he will act if energy bills do go up by £500. Mr. Speaker, Donald Trump's war on Iran has not only brought more chaos across the Middle East, it's increased the threat to our national security here at home. Iran's Revolutionary Guard has previously plotted several failed terrorist attacks in the UK, targeting Iranian journalists, British Jews and members of this House. Now they are more desperate and dangerous than ever. We've called for the IRGC to be prescribed as terrorists for years. The last government failed to do it, and so has his. So will the Prime Minister table emergency legislation to better protect our country from Iranian terrorists? Will he do it this week?
Prime Minister.
Can I just, again, thank you for raising this. It is very important, I say to the House, that as he would, and the House would expect, we are working 24/7 on dealing with any threats to this country. And I spoke on Monday about the 20 Iran-backed threats that we had successfully dealt with, and we continue to do so, and we're working on it 24/7. So it's important that I say that. In relation to the IRGC, obviously we've put in place a number of sanctions already. We don't comment on prescription, but we have made the case that there needs to be legislation to deal with state-backed terrorist groups, and we're looking into that.
Not really an answer there, Stefan.
No, and I think it's pretty clear no that they're not going to bring forward emergency legislation to do this. And there's a few things to unpack here. I mean, the first thing is the government's position for a long time has been that, and this is, across Tory and Labour governments, is that essentially it's quite useful for us to have an embassy in Tehran. It's quite useful for us to have diplomats there, and so we're not going to prescribe them as a terror group. We're going to bring in this other sort of legislation, this other sort of designation for state-backed for state organisations. But this seems to be now behind the curve, and I think they need to move a bit quicker because of this war. If there's a regime change, the IRGC would be completely dismantled because they are the hub of the Iranian regime's terrorist proxies. They run them all. So if the regime goes, that will go. If they stay, I mean, the UK is in no position at the moment to have any sort of role in any negotiations in this war. We're really on the periphery. That would go towards other third countries like Oman or Qatar. And, frankly, I think that he just needs to move a bit faster on this. And if he does want to show some sort of leadership, this would be an area where it's, at this point, fairly consequence-free just to bring this forward and prescribe them like, for instance, Australia, Canada and the US has done.
Do either of you, Patrick or Tim, do you think he's likely to actually move on this?
Well, what's interesting is a lot of people in the sort of counterfactual, the counter-argument to that is sort of, is part of the reason we've never prescribed them. And obviously no one ever says this bluntly because the Americans need a back channel to these people, and you can find one running through London. And, if we're now into a space where, the whole regime is collapsing and we're playing divide and... Well, not we, the West is playing divide and rule, and bits of it is having, a building in on the banks of the Thames in Vauxhall that's able to get through to these people quite useful.
I don't think it's the building in London that's important, it's the building in Tehran that's important, and various security people have said to me in the past that the Americans don't have an embassy there. It's quite helpful for Western intelligence in general if we do, and various things operate out of there. And so far the regime hasn't collapsed, and understanding the different bits of it and the bits we might talk to and the bits that might want to do a deal, it's probably quite helpful to have people on the ground. So I suspect if they are rationalising it, that is the explanation they would give.
I believe Dan Jarvis, the security minister, has just been speaking in the House. Let's see if we can hear a bit of that.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to make a statement regarding 3 arrests that took place this morning as part of counter-terrorism policing investigation into suspected National Security Act offences. I can confirm that this relates to China. I can also confirm that this relates to foreign interference targeting UK democracy. Mr. Speaker, for reasons that you will understand, it would not be appropriate for me to comment on any aspect of what is now a live investigation. It is absolutely critical that we do not hamper the work of the police or prejudice any future legal processes by what we say in this House today. I would, however, point the House to what the counter-terrorism police have just said in their own statement, namely that this morning officers from counter-terrorism policing arrested 3 men as part of an investigation into suspected National Security Act 2023 offences. All 3 men were arrested on suspicion of assisting a foreign intelligence service contrary to Section 3 of the National Security Act. Of course, any decision as to whether to proceed with a prosecution would be a matter for the Crown Prosecution Service. Now, Mr. Speaker, this government stands resolute in our resolve to counter foreign interference activity targeting the UK from any state actor. The government has been consistent and unambiguous in our assessment that China presents a series of threats to the United Kingdom. We remain deeply concerned by an increasing pattern of covert activity from Chinese state-linked actors targeting UK democracy. This involves attempts to obtain information on UK policy making and interfere with our sovereign affairs. From the November MI5 espionage alert warning about Chinese intelligence officers targeting individuals with access to sensitive information on Parliament and government, to the attempted interference activities of Christine Lee in 2022, this government will not tolerate it. And I can confirm to the House that British officials have formally démarched Chinese counterparts in London and Beijing about these allegations to raise our strong concerns. However, as this is a live investigation, it would not be appropriate to comment further. But let me be clear. If there is proven evidence of attempts by China to interfere with UK sovereign affairs, we will impose severe consequences and hold all actors involved to account.
OK, so quite a lot of information there. Stefan, one can't help but think that the last time we, as the British state, tried to prosecute people over Chinese spying activities linked to Westminster, it didn't go wholly well.
No, it wasn't the most successful thing. We ended up talking about it for months with not much happening. But I think, for me, like, the most interesting thing was the last line he had was talking about consequences if, China has been seen to try to interfere with our democracy. Well, we've known for years that they've tried to interfere with our democracy because, as you've said, there's been people charged with things, although not, convicted in the end. We've had just a few months ago examples of former aides trying to be recruited by Chinese agents. We've had years and years and years of this. I'm really interested to see what happened here and what happened in the context of China Starmer just going to China to try to get better trade terms.
Tim, what set your antennae twitching about that statement?
Well, I mean, the fact that they've day-marched the Chinese is interesting because you don't always have to do that. And
what does that mean?
Well, it means called them in for a bollocking, bluntly.
It's not often it happens.
It doesn't happen very often in a formal way. You often have a quiet word or whatever, but sort of formally summoning the ambassador or whoever it was to sit there and be lectured. But this is just much more dangerous for Labour, isn't it, than the last case we saw, where they got in a right pickle over the fact that the case was dropped. If this involves people who are close to Labour MPs, then it's going to be very much harder. They will hope the police do a bang-up job of making sure every I is dotted and T crossed, because they don't want to be in a position where you've got a case collapsing and it looks like the government might have done something to stop embarrassment for their own side. So this is a much more perilous scenario, it seems to me.
Julian gets in touch while we're talking. He says, isn't this time to rethink allowing their new embassy in an ideal location to conduct further espionage? What do you think, Patrick?
I think that ship has sailed.
Yeah, but it looks. I mean, you add all this together. I know this isn't remotely.
Well, this is the funny thing about
linked to Iran.
Well, indeed, but this is the funny thing about severe, like Dan Jarvis threatening severe consequences to the Chinese. It's like, actually, you've paid your money and made your choice on the Chinese espionage stuff, guys. It's sort of like, the point at which to threaten severe consequences was, probably about 30 years ago.
Yeah, but I mean,
it's over.
Just overall, one comes out of that whole session, don't you think, of just, I don't know, because it's all about security, it's all about stability, it's all about how well defended we are as a country, and you just get a slight feeling of things just, you know what I mean, slightly falling apart, Patrick.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. From the army not being fit to take part in a war, even if we wanted to every politician probably knowing at least knowing another politician or somebody who's possibly allegedly compromised by a foreign agent. It's not great, is it?
Yeah. Well, look, I think, have we got time to cram in one more question? I think we probably do. Let's get. What's your last question from the backbenchers?
Last one is Tory MP Gareth Bacon.
Okay, let's hear it quickly.
Mr. Speaker, the United States of America is our most important international strategic ally.
Yeah.
Does the Prime Minister believe that his dithering and equivocal response to events in the Middle East this week has made that relationship stronger or weaker?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the American planes are operating out of British bases. That is the special relationship in action. British jets are shooting down drones and missiles to protect American lives in the Middle East on our joint bases. That is the special relationship in action. Sharing intelligence every day to keep our people safe. That is the special relationship in action. Hanging on to President Trump's latest words is not the special relationship in action.
That's very carefully phrased there, Stefan.
It was. I was sort of confused by it. I mean, was that an attack on Gareth Bacon or Trump? I couldn't really be sure there. I mean, it's the one time where someone finally brings up that Trump has had a pop at him over the last few days, and it's a strange response. I mean, my instinct was he was hanging it on Gareth Bacon for following Trump. I mean, what did you guys say?
He was sort of saying, you don't need to listen to what that President Trump says. He says all sorts of things that you don't need to listen to.
At last, some truth spoken in the House of Commons.
But the problem is that, the word out of the White House is that Trump took it as, the initial decision is the one that was the symbolic one. Where we've got to now is sort of broadly irrelevant as far as he's concerned. And I think the bigger issue, really, is that it's not just the Americans who are annoyed. Pretty well every Western ally is annoyed with Starmer's equivocation. And I think that does some damage well beyond, the bloviating of the president.
Look, thank you. That's us out of time. Thank you all very much. Stefan, thanks for being with us. Stefan will be in your inbox in a couple of hours with the PMQs Unpacked roundup, so look out for that. Times subscribers can sign up at thetimes.com/newsletters. If you don't already, what are you waiting for? Patrick Maguire, always a pleasure to have you here.
My
Tim
pleasure.
Shipman, the prodigal son, returned. Great to see you. I hope you'll come back again. This is Hugo Rifkind here on Times Radio.
John Pienaar on Times Radio Drive with Service Now. All the latest national and international breaking news and informative interviews. Plus, hear unrivaled journalistic expertise and detailed analysis on the radio programme where sharp insight meets original thinking. John Pienaar on Times Radio Drive. This afternoon from 4 on Times Radio with Service Now. The AI control tower for business reinvention.